Thanks for joining us for this edition of In the Loop on County Cable Montgomery. I'm Neil Greenberger, and our special guest today is Montgomery County Councilmember Marc Elrich. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. How you doing?
There are many things we want to talk about. The council just recently passed a budget for fiscal year 14. A lot of things different than the past few years of a budget. This is the seventh budget you worked on at least the county council. What's different? What have you learned about this process that maybe you didn't think about when you were running, and as it's evolved and we've had periods of not much money and hard times, and it's not great, but it's getting a little better?
It is getting better. I will say when I ran, I actually had kind of thought that we would reach this point because we had been at a position where we had our tax rates at the maximum levels, and recessions are a normal cyclical occurrence, so we weren't prepared for a recession. And I think it hit us pretty hard. We'd gone through a pretty heavy growth in the government, the previous years before I was elected, and that was not sustainable. And I think, the county executive rightly understood that this was more than a typical 1 or 2 year recession. I think the thinking, even initially, was, American recession, 2 years, everything will be fine. This was not 2 years, everything will be fine. This is 7 years down the road, everything's still not fine. But it's better. We're getting some recovery in property taxes, some recovery in income taxes. It's uneven, and it's question. We're not in another bubble, which is a good thing. But we lived on bubbles for a while, so I think it's going to be different for a while.
What was different this time? Things seem to be easing up. Is it harder, easier once you see where do we go? What do we restore? Where do we change? And finally, you get a chance to shape a little direction.
Yeah, but it was a discussion about what you can do differently. And, for the last few years, it's all been what do you cut? And, which cuts cause the least amount of pain, knowing that you're causing pain pretty continuously. And this was the first time, really, last year a little bit, but this year better, the ability to say we want to put library services back, we want to put rec services back, we want to do something for our employees, which we haven't been able to do. There was a general view that, we should take this opportunity to get back on track, try to do the things in Montgomery County, I think get done pretty well, which is provide services to county residents.
We're going to talk about some of these issues, but I know throughout this budget process, you get out as much as anyone in the community. You talk to more people. You talk to groups that many people don't talk to. What did you hear this time? What have you been learning? And what do people don't see about all these groups that you do talk about that aren't prominent? People see council members publicly. They see you on the dais. They see you taking votes. What do people don't see?
People don't see the meetings. I mean, when I tell people, what my day's like, it's like, well, do you have another job? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, today, for example, is going to go from 9 o'clock this morning to 9 o'clock tonight. Tomorrow is 9 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night.
Pretty good off day.
And we're on recess right now. So I don't think people see all the meetings that we take and all the places we show up in the community. As to what I heard, I mean, there are a lot of advocates in the community for restoration of things. People really felt the loss of the libraries or the cutbacks in the libraries. And, people really feel the changes in rec programs. I asked the question, because we've been showing this, slight decline in rec programming and number of kids served. And I wanted to know what the difference was between before the recession started and now. And we're serving about half the kids that we served before the recession started. That gives you an idea of the magnitude of the breaks.
It's one thing to just talk numbers and cuts and people affected. How do you think this county has been changed, if at all, by these tough years?
I think it's been really sobering. I think there's, an understanding that what you do going forward, you have to do more carefully. We're still not talking about brilliant new ideas and lots of programs to add. It's sort of like, what do you have and what works? And I think it's a good thing to really, start critically examining if I'm spending your money, is it really working? Is it really producing what I want it to produce? So I think we've become more critical. and more self-aware about the kind of decisions we make.
You've been in government for decades now. I hate to say it, but you have been.
Feel free.
Do you think these lessons will carry over, or you've been through so many ups and downs, both when you were in Tacoma Park on that city council? Can people remember and say, there's going to be another bad day? We don't know when, but should we be better prepared?
I mean, can you remember and will you remember? We have perfectly the capability of remembering. It's really tempting to promise people stuff. It's really tempting to get out in front of where you are and just assume that either the bubble will last longer than you're in office or that the damage won't visit you until after you've left. I mean, one of my criticisms of the earlier years before us is, the county grew enormously. We didn't grow very much infrastructure. We didn't increase the police. We didn't increase the fire. We fell way behind in schools. That was all part of a way of saying growth has no cost. We're not building anything. And now, I was on the council that we're trying to catch up on schools, fire stations, and police stations. I mean, hopefully people will be more cautious in the future.
One of the things about promises is it takes a lot of work to even make a promise. You have, more than anyone in this council, devoted yourself to trying to see a rapid transit system in this county. It's had some ups and downs. Where does it stand now?
It's in front of the planning board. They're going to make recommendations on routes. I think the report they did is okay. I think it makes, I think, some characteristic mistakes in thinking where, particularly where assumptions about future ridership are based on current ridership. And if you have a system, like the ride-on system, frankly, or the metro system, which goes to few places, you really can't predict what ridership will be in the future if you replace what's called the non-choice system with a system people might choose to use. If buses like now aren't available and infrequent, it's hard for a person to say, I'm going to rely on a bus system. They might make different choices if buses ran every 6 minutes at rush hour and didn't stop for lights because they had a greenway to go through.
Rapid transit, for those who don't know, is probably in its entirety about 150, 160 miles, dedicated routes, specially designed vehicles. How important would this be to the growth of this entire county and the way we shape to get something that, and as you say, that people would actually use?
Yeah, I think that, and there are a couple of studies that were done that I think back this up. If we don't provide another way to get around and we solely rely on cars, we have no ability to provide the road capacity that our growth projections anticipate. It is flat out impossible. You would have to lower the standards on the roads, so basically you were saying roads could be parking lots. And White Flint was a good example because the original park and planning proposal would have allowed speeds on 355 Wisconsin Avenue to drop to 4 miles an hour and still be acceptable. Acceptable to the planners, I don't think it would be very acceptable to the residents. And that's not where we wound up, fortunately. But that was the logical implication of a road-based solution to things, because you can't build the roads. So I think if you're going to have economic development, and we need to have some measure of growth in the county, and we've got, I think, a couple of opportunities that we ought to take advantage of, you've got to be able to provide a transportation that can get people there, because you'll either not be able to do it because everything will fail the road tests, or you'll do what other councils have done, which is change the road tests. So on the one hand, everything passes, and on the other hand, nothing works.
How are you on the optimism scale that someday rapid transit is going to be part of this county?
I'm pretty optimistic. I mean, I really think that that you'll see pieces of this start to be built in the next term, next 4 years, and I think it'll make a difference here.
You mentioned White Flint. There's some really major growth areas that are in different stages in this county. One of them that you've been very involved from the start, and now it's evolving at a rapid rate, is Clarksburg. You happy the way things are going there?
They need transit brought up to Clarksburg. They need the transit brought up there now, not in some phase that's 15 years from now. I'm not happy with the proposal for the outlet mall. Particularly not for the outlet mall where Adventist was going to be, I get, because there's not going to be another hospital up there because of the decision by the State Hospital Board. That's right on the 270. It makes some sense. The outlet mall in the middle of Clarksburg on the head of 10 Mile Creek makes no sense to me at all. And it's worse than that in the sense that that was planned to be commercial business, and we were looking to bring quality jobs into Clarksburg. And all this has been delayed partly by the fact that the transit that was promised was never provided. And at this moment, where it looks like we're going to have the money to provide transit and do the CCT, to sell out the idea of let's make this an employment center with decent jobs for people who live there and turn it into an outlet mall is just, to me, a mistake. And in the heart of Clarksburg, even a bigger mistake.
Mm-hmm. There's a science center plan for this county, totally different scale. Going to have a great impact on what this county looks like?
Well, it's going to be concentrated. It's not going to change how much the county looks, but it has the possibility of drawing in a different job base. I mean, to the extent that you do get science jobs out of this, it's a far sight better than getting retail jobs. And a lot of our growth is in retail. The planning board is, obsessed with every plan having retail blanketing the ground floors. I'd rather have high quality science jobs to the extent we can get them. I also think that, the county has a science triangle, and we don't talk about it. But, the truth is, between FDA in White Oak and NIH in Bethesda and National Cancer Institute and the Science Quarter and all the biotech firms up around what we called Science City during the debates, we've got 3 important centers for science in the county. We've got probably more science in this county than any other place in the country. There are probably a few that have more, but we're pretty heavily loaded. And we ought to be able to take advantage of those 3 centers. And I think we ought to prioritize those 3 centers in terms of, where you focus the ability to accommodate additional growth, because that's frankly where the tax money is going to be.
And that's where it's at. We've touched on some major subjects of this county. One, not so major, but major to some very important people in the Sandy Spring area, and that's an area that people follow it called Farm Road. It's an area of land that was owned originally by freed slaves. As development has gone all around it, the Farm Road access to it is sort of cut off this land. They've been in a battle with our Park and Planning Department because their land is basically useless. You've been very involved in this. How complicated is this?
Well, it's been a 6-year mess for the 6 years I've been involved in it. And to me, it's really sad. I mean, these folks had land which originally they had access to. And there's an old road that dates back to probably before the Civil War era. That's just a gravel, dirt gravel path through there, not unlike other farm roads in the county. That was ingress and egress for these lots, which had no access to the main paved roads. And as a result of a development that had nothing to do with these people, a map was submitted that took the farm road off the map. When it took the road off the map, it took away the ability of people to get addresses. And in my view, a mistake was made. I don't think the Park and Planning did anything deliberately wrong. I think somebody didn't realize, A, that they were taking the road off and what the consequences would be. The fact that it's been 6 years to try to get this fixed just absolutely astounds me. And these people have been victims of scams. One person lost property, another person almost lost property, but for Eric Friedman and Consumer Affairs actually preventing him from losing his lot. I mean, this is a sad story. And you're talking about, people without great means going up against Park and Planning.
A chance that this will get resolved in a fair way?
I was at a meeting and Francoise Carrier said that they would get addresses, that this would be solved. I think it can be solved. I think it can be solved easily. You can get to the same end in a slightly more convoluted way. I hope they choose the easy way. These people are just really upset. They didn't even want to talk about needing mediation. They're like, we've been doing this 6 years. Just give us our road back. And I'm like, give them the road back.
Well, I think if people like yourself had not been involved in this.
The people I really give credit to is the press on this one. I don't often give them a lot of credit. The press has kind of not been really good about digging into things, but if a reporter hadn't made this a story, it wouldn't have attracted attention. Nothing was happening at Park and Planning to resolve this. And the fact that it's got all this attention, and it looks really bad. I mean, Montgomery County takes away access from old historic black community. That's not a really good headline.
As a former reporter, I'll take any kudos for the profession. Well, we've touched on many subjects, many more we want to talk about. I thank Councilmember Marc Elrich for being with us today on In the Loop. I'm Neil Greenberger. Thanks for joining us.